Hello and welcome to the 10th screencast for Chapter 18. My apologies. I ran over 15 minutes and I had to cut off the last end of that screencast, so we're going to pick up and there might be a little bit of repetition here. But transportation is the second largest source of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. The U.S. family makes about 10 trips each day with their cars. And think about it, dropping off at school, going to work, going home from work, running somebody to a sporting event or an activity or to a friend's house, grocery shopping. So about 10 trips in a car each day. And most cars are very inefficient, wasting about 85% of the fuel. And we do have the ability to make more efficient gas-powered cars. But what happens is the moguls of the oil industry, they pay their politicians to vote to not pass the ability to make these more fuel efficient cars because they're afraid that they're going to lose their income, the billions and billions of dollars that they're making. But the type of cars we can make are hybrid cars, and we're seeing a lot of those with the Prius. As an example, we're seeing electric cars. The Tesla is a very beautiful car that's being made. We're looking at alternative fuel options like hydrogen fuel cars, and as an example. But we need more efficient cars and we need to produce fewer emissions, and that needs to be a goal. Alternatives to relying on cars is living in closer proximity to where you work so that you can bike or walk to work, using public transportation. That actually saves about 4.2 billion gallons of gas and about 37 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. Carpooling would be another example. Smart cars. So there's a lot of different ways that we can cut down. Busing would be an example. Trains, that goes in with our public transportation. So when we take a look at this graphic, what we are seeing is that it's showing you how fuel inefficient conventional automobiles are. About 13 to 14% of the energy from the tank actually moves the car. 62% of that energy goes into heat loss in the engine and friction inefficiencies. 17% goes into idling to keep that motor running. About 5% goes into the drivetrain friction, which is the way that it moves and powers the car. And then 2% goes into running your accessories, the water pump that helps keep the car cool, your stereo, your air conditioning that you have in the car if you have DVD players that are in there. So we're looking at nearly 85% of the energy is lost in the form of heat. And that's what this is saying. All of this is lost in heat, and only about 14% of that gasoline goes into moving the cars. So you need to cut the use of your car. Include bicycle and walking trails, public transportation. All of these would help reduce the car emissions. So as far as agriculture is concerned, agriculture needs sustainable land management so that the soil stores more carbon. We need to be able to reduce the methane emissions from rice and cattle. That's going to be a little bit difficult. We would have to reduce cattle. We would have to reduce the amount of rice. So that's difficult. We have to find some way to be able to do that. We can't really control cattle passing gas, but maybe give them food that is less gas causing. We need to be able to grow renewable biofuels. As far as forestry is concerned, we need to reforest cleared land. We need to plant trees. Plant a tree as a gift for somebody instead of actually giving a present. Pay for a tree to be planted or plant one in your yard. Preserve existing forest. We need sustainable forestry practices. Waste management, we saw this firsthand. We need to treat our wastewater. We need to be able to use it to generate electricity by incinerating the waste. We need to recover that methane from landfills. As individuals, we can recycle, we can compost, we can reduce, we can reuse our goods. We can limit buying new furniture, buying new technology, and fixing what we have and using what we have. There's no magic bullet for mitigating climate change, and I think we have to understand that. There's nothing that is going to stop it instantaneously. It has to be a collective of things. Most reductions can be achieved by using current technology, and we can use that technology right now. We need to adopt a portfolio of strategies, not just one, as I mentioned, but a couple. And each one needs to be feasible in itself that could stabilize the carbon dioxide emissions. If we looked at 15 strategies that would reduce 1 billion tons of carbon each year by 2050, we need to use those strategies. Even by achieving 7 would stabilize the emissions. So more than 7 would reduce the emissions. So here are those 15 strategies and how they would affect. We could double the fuel economy of cars. We would have, if we cut in half the miles driven by a car, if we maximize the efficiency in all of our buildings, we double the efficiency of coal-powered plants. We switch from coal to natural gas. We capture and store carbon. We capture and store carbon in synthetic fuel plants. We increase hydrogen fuel production, triple the world's nuclear capacity, increase the wind power capacity, increase solar capacity, increase ethanol production, halt tropical deforestation and double reforestation, and adopt conservation tillage on all croplands. These are the 15 ways. If we can, as we said, adopt 7 of them, that would slow the emissions. Governments could take different approaches to address climate change. They can mandate change through laws and regulations, or they can do nothing and let the market solve the problem. They could use financial incentives to help private entities reduce the emissions. So these are 3 ways government can help. In 2009, the House of Representatives passed legislation that created an emissions cap and trade system. And this is where industries and utilities compete to reduce emissions for financial gain. So they would get rewards if they were able to reduce emissions. It did not pass the Senate. The Senate did not approve. The EPA has begun a slowly phased-in program of emissions reductions for industries and utilities. So they are trying to work with this. Global cooperation is needed also. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was established in 1992, was a plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from levels in the 1990s by 2000. It was a voluntary program that had a nation-by-nation approach to it. By the late 1990s, it was clear that the voluntary approach just did not succeed. Emissions kept rising, so developing nations created a binding international treaty that required excuse me, emissions reduction, and this is called the Kyoto Protocol. So between 2008 and 2012, nations signed this Kyoto Protocol, and they now must reduce their emissions of 6 greenhouse gases to levels below those of the 1990s. The treaty took effect in 2005. The United States was the only industrial nation not to ratify the Kyoto Protocol. They still haven't. It requires industrialized nations to reduce emissions, but it does not require industrialized nations to reduce theirs, and that was China and India. Other countries resented the U.S. because it emits 20% of the world's greenhouse gases, and we saw that in the movie Before the Flood. They're all looking at the United States to take action. Those countries that did sign, they've reduced their emissions from 8.9% from 1990s amounts, largely due to economic contraction in the countries and the former Soviet Union. So economics played a role in this. With those nations removed, others showed a 4.9% rise. Okay, so in this graph that we're seeing, the nations that ratify and decrease their emissions of the 6 greenhouse gases by 8.9% in 2010. So that's this graph that we're seeing here. Former Soviet bloc nations. This is the combination of all nations, and these are the non-Soviet nations. And the other graph shows that a select majority of nations showed various outcomes reducing emissions. So here's those countries that were able to reduce emissions. Look at where the United States is. We're still putting emissions out. Australia, though, is leading the top. So international conferences have been held to design a successor treaty to the Kyoto Protocol. In 2009, there was a conference that was held in Copenhagen. During this conference, China promised to steep emission cuts, but without any international monitoring. They didn't want anybody watching what they were doing or overseeing what they were doing. They said that they would do it on their own. Obama favored emission cuts, but would not promise more than Congress had agreed to. So the United States is still depending on Congress to agree to the policies. We could not achieve in a unanimous vote, so no specific targets or commitments were set with this conference. And several nations denounced the accord so that it could not even be adopted by a consensus. So it's not widely accepted, and it needs to be widely accepted. There was a conference in 2010 held in Cancun, Mexico. Developed nations pledged to financially support developing nations in the mitigation and adaptation efforts to reduce tropical forest loss. China and India agreed in the principle to emission targets and monitoring. So these were 2 positive effects that came out of this conference. In 2011, in Durban, South Africa, another conference was held, and the nations agreed to roadmap toward legally binding deal in 2015, and they would start after 2020. So what this means is they agreed to lay out a plan, and this plan would be put in effect by 2020. Scientists are disappointed. Nothing really would happen until 2020 because it's creating a lost decade. It's creating time that we could be working on things. Okay, our time's getting close. I don't want to run over this time, so we'll end this screencast.